Hello, Rachel. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
So I am a teacher. I've been a teacher for about 15 years. I started out teaching biology, science and biology, and then throughout my career, I took on more of a pastoral role. So I've been a house mistress, and a PSHE coordinator. And then in recent years, I've worked as a PSHE consultant as well. So I help schools address wellbeing concerns, make sure they're teaching the best quality PSHE and wellbeing, RSE and health education in schools. And I write resources for some companies to help them provide schools with the best possible resources. And in doing that, I have also done a lot of reading and research into adolescent neurological development. So, what makes a teenager different? Why do they behave the way they do? And how can we educate them with that in mind?
Okay,
So that's sort of an overview of what I do.
perfect. And myself and you got in contact through LinkedIn. I
Yeah,
believe you messaged me or maybe even commented on one of my posts where I was
yeah.
asking for people's opinions. And you mentioned that you could possibly help me. And your profile there is exactly the kind of experience that someone would have that like I need to come and help me with this work because as you know I'm kind of starting from scratch here,
Yeah,
so I'm trying my best to like build my knowledge, which will help my talks in schools.
yeah,
And so I know that you watched the latest one that I posted, which was
yeah.
to year 11. So anybody that's listening or watching along on YouTube, um, for your, if you don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I posted a live recording of my session that I delivered to year 11s. We in this podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Rachel's going to help us understand like how that was, the dynamics of it, and some of the good bits and maybe the bits that need improving. And we'll just have a general chat. And so, really, Rachel, maybe I could just hand over to you and just let you begin. Maybe you could just give us a some idea of what you thought and
Yeah,
anything
of
around that.
course. I thought it was really good, and um I think it's really valuable that the students in that context really engaged with you, and you're charismatic and you're funny and you're intelligent and you've got so much to offer. And they can see that. I think they really engaged with that about you.
Great.
And I think that's really good because often we hear the worst possible outcome, or we hear that, a story that is to frighten young people out of doing things. And we know from the data that doesn't work. It may work for a few, but scaring people out of doing something often doesn't work. And there's some interesting things that happen in the teenage brain that means actually they do start to take more risks. So actually, I really liked that you came at it from that angle, which is the positive angle. So
Okay,
I
so
think
let
that
me
was really
just
brilliant.
interrupt here. I'm so sorry
Mm.
because I
No,
don't
please
want us
do
to get
carry
too
on.
far along because I want to you said something that really interested me and you said the worst possible outcome or just too scary.
Yeah.
What kind of thing would that look like? Someone telling
So,
their story and it just being sadness and sorrow.
yeah, or what we don't want to do is get young people into a point where they're frightened of developing relationships because of what might go wrong. So all we
Okay.
teach them is this is a negative relationship. This is what might go wrong. This is what to avoid. What we want to do is going, this is good. This is what we want. This is what is helpful for us. And teenagers aren't stupid. They'll figure out if it's not that. So that was really good. And I think so often with things that we desperately want young people to avoid, we go, please don't do this because this is what might happen to you.
Mm.
And I don't, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as well as saying this is what your life could be if you can do this, this, and this. Do you
Okay,
see the
so if we
difference?
were to pull in an analogy here and
Yeah.
say we were to bring in a speaker to talk about drugs
Yeah.
to teenagers, how would you relate that technique you've just spoken about to that conversation? Because you know the first thing us adults would do, which may not be the most intelligent thing to do with teenagers, would be don't touch drugs because
Yeah.
you will get an addiction and you will this and you will that. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And as a parent, as a teacher, as someone who cares for a young person, we know what is potentially ahead. We know some of the uglier things that might happen later in life, or as a young person as well. And we desperately don't want that to happen to the young people we care for. So it is natural to want to do that. So I I don't believe in hiding truths from teenagers because they're going to find out anyway because they see it all online.
Yeah.
Um, but the way, if I'm devising a scheme or I'm teaching young people, um, and this is why I think well-being in schools needs to be holistic and not just sort of, okay, we're just doing one lesson on drugs here, we're going to do one lesson on risky sexual behavior here, you know? Um, because what actually do we want young people to do with that information that we're teaching them or the information that you're giving them in your talk? And for me, what that boils down to is I want them to use that information to make good choices for themselves.
Right.
So the skill is being able to make a good choice for yourself.
Right.
And you need the information to do that, sure. And we can give them information in school. We can give them places to find reliable information. But the skill is taking that information and making a good choice for themselves. And for me, that boils down to self-worth because I'm not going to treat my body with respect and eat well and not drink too much and not take illegal drugs if I don't think I'm worth care and protection. If I
Okay.
don't think my body is worth anything, I won't look after it. If I won't make positive choices in relationships, if I don't believe that I'm worthy of love.
Mm.
So for me, a lot of it boils down to self-worth and building self-worth in young people, building that emotional resilience in young people so that when they do get knocked, they're able to go, but this is what I care about myself. So I'm going to reject that or I'm going to accept that. So that underpins a lot of the work I do and a lot of the sessions and lessons I write and the lessons I deliver is that how can I give the young person, yes, the information and the vocabulary and the confidence to be able to say, no, that is not right for me. I don't want it. And that's incredibly difficult for a teenager.
Okay.
Incredibly difficult for a
That's
teenager.
so great. So we could we also say self-worth is kind of self-confidence, confidence within
Yeah.
yourself to
Yeah,
say,
and yeah, I think sometimes young people think confidence is being able to speak up and be
hmm,
the life and soul and be the loud one and be the vocal one, and it's not always.
hmm.
Um, but you can quietly go, no, thanks.
Okay, so you
You don't
can
have to make, you don't have to be the loud about it, but you can still care for yourself.
okay, so we can give these young people, which is something now that I'm going to think about a lot, is what I'm trying to do is give these young people something to remember, a story that they can either relate to or that will inspire them, and let them know that they can feel confident in making decisions around this crime. That
Hmm.
being either if you feel like some form of grooming or exploitation is near you, you can actually make a stand and say something about it.
Yeah.
Or if this has happened to you before, um, and you've always wanted to say something but never felt confident to,
Mm.
yes, actually you can.
Yeah.
And it's so great because yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I do not want to leave everyone feeling absolutely fearful of the world,
Yeah.
exhausted,
Mm.
completely sad,
You
and
don't
like,
want them on high alert every time they go out.
right, that's not what
And
we're looking for.
no, and there's some also really interesting research on being happy and a brain that's happy and has got lots of dopamine, which is the
Hmm.
neurotransmitter that is associated with feelings of happiness. Um, that dopamine also turns in on all of the learning centers of the brain. So we want
Wow.
schools to be happy places. We
Okay.
want dopamine to be happening in schools as much as possible, and in lives, of course, we want to be happy. But it's really, really important for learning. So in your session, again, I thought this was really positive, is that you didn't come at it from a scary angle. And because you were engaging and like really likable, that actually probably did raise dopamine levels, so
Mm.
they were able to turn on the learning centers of their brain, not consciously, but
Mm.
they were more switched on and they were more likely therefore to learn from that experience
Brilliant.
than if you say this is going to be scary and they went in feeling apprehensive. Dopamine would be potentially lower, less likely to learn, actually to do effective learning in that situation. So I'm not saying that we make everything rosy and
Mm.
everything happy and not everything has to be sparkly unicorns, because life is not like that.
Mm.
But what can we do to make sure that young people are relaxed, confident, and not stressed or worried about what's going to happen.
Okay, so I start my talk kind of on the back foot because
Yeah.
those students are at school, a place where they don't want to be, unfortunately. I mean, we could have a very interesting conversation about how it's such a shame that all kids seem to hate school. It should be
I
it
don't
should,
know.
it should be the opposite, but
All teenagers hate everything.
yeah, that's true.
So no,
But
I
that's a
don't
good
think it
point.
is. I
But
don't
that's a
think
good
it's
point
true. Yeah.
because when I have a group of year 10s, for example, walking into the hall, they've
Mm,
been told in approximate terms what this is going to be about. I
mm.
actually have put together an introduction paragraph that I asked the school to read out to all the
Oh,
students
yeah.
before
Hmm.
they come. That
Mm.
lets them know that what this is going to be about. That also gives any students the opportunity to speak with a teacher about possibly opting out
Not
if they
going.
need
Yeah.
to.
Hmm.
I've also, in the last school that I spoke at, sent the school a paragraph to send to all the parents,
Yeah. I think
right?
that's important.
Which was
Yeah.
really interesting because, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here and lose my original point, but it was really interesting because one of the schools did that and they asked the students who's had a conversation with their parents about what Jeremy is going to talk about. And
Mm.
some put hands up. I didn't
That's
think
good.
any would because the parents have read the paragraph, the kids have read the paragraph, and now they've had a conversation about it before I come.
Yeah.
Absolutely
And
amazing.
I'd imagine a lot of parents are just delighted that it's happening
Okay,
because parents, I think, are worried about this.
right.
They are worried about the safety of their children, and they find it hard to have those conversations themselves.
Mm,
So having them in school is really good. And we do hear a lot of negativity about some parents not liking what happens with sex ed in schools.
yes.
But it's a minority.
Okay.
It's a real minority. They are a vocal minority. That's why we get a disproportionate idea. But in my experience in a school, and I've taught sex ed to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children, 99.9% of the time, parents don't get in touch and they're not worried and they're happy it's happening. Sometimes they do get in touch and want some more information. You explain to them what effective sex ed is, and they think, thank goodness, that's great.
Wow.
Some people say, I'm still worried about it and I would like to remove my child from that lesson. And
Mm.
I say, yep, absolutely. Of course, you have a right to do that. How are you going to ensure that they get this important education? And then think, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this. You do it. Yeah, they can stay. So actually, it's very, very, very few parents who don't want their children to learn this.
Do you know what?
They're
That's
really happy
great
they
for
do.
me to
Yeah.
hear because
In
I'm
my
under the
experience, in my
right.
experience.
Okay, and that's
Mm.
great. I'll take that because
Yeah.
in my mind, I had the impression that you know, the parents that would have read the paragraph would have just immediately got fearful. But yeah, maybe they were like, actually, like we know the dangers of online
Mm.
in that our children are facing in online space and in person spaces, and this is great. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
maybe I
think they
should.
do. I think most parents will be really glad because they are worried about it and they don't really know what to
Yeah,
do. Yeah.
yeah,
So
fantastic,
having this, I think, is really good. Yeah.
fantastic. So the original point that I started with was the fact that I feel like, and I read this from the body language and the facial expressions of the students walking into the hall for my talk because they're so bored of speakers boring them,
Hmm.
essentially, right?
Yeah.
You know, they've got people coming in, they're just reading off slides and
Yeah.
it's the same old thing and there's no interaction. And they tell me this, but I can see it on their face as well. And because they don't know me, when they walk in, they are kind of slumped over and what's this going to be about? And you know, that's why I try to be as engaging as I possibly can. But yeah, your comment about the dopamine thing and the being happy and learning from it thing. It's like I
Mm.
need to
Yeah.
turn that attitude that they're coming to me with. I need to turn that around as soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just talk about that. What you perceive as that attitude they're coming to you with, and it
Great.
may not be what you think it is.
Okay.
So, let's just talk really briefly about what is important to a teenage brain.
Brilliant.
Okay. And so we'll go through this really quickly, and therefore I will probably oversimplify it
Mm.
in order to give you the idea. But if we think about a primitive human, yeah, humans are group animals. We always live in groups. We don't live on our own. We're not solitary. And when you're a child, you live with your close family. Okay. Think about a primitive human here. All right. When you reach puberty, when that primitive human reaches puberty, they become sexually active. It's important then for them to leave that family,
Mm.
right? Because we don't
Wow.
want inbreeding, we want outbreeding. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
So at the age when puberty starts to happen, big changes in the brain happen. Um, and some of those are to do with finding a new group. So a primitive human leaves their family group, um, and then is out there on their own. Okay. That's really dangerous for a human who is a group animal. So that human now needs to find another group to be accepted by, and it's a matter of life and death for them.
Wow.
So that translates now to a modern human adolescent pushing away from their family, not talking to their family much. You think your little children want to hold your hand and tell you
Hmm.
things and be engaged with you. And it's really hard as a parent when they become teenagers and they just don't want to
Hmm.
have anything to do with
Mm.
you. And they become incredibly invested in their social relationships. So that's one thing that because they have to find, it's all consuming. They have to fit in. They have to fit in. So some of what their behavior will be them trying to fit in with their peers. Might
Right.
not necessarily be what is going on in their head. They might be secretly thinking, oh, this might be quite good, or this might be quite scary, or that,
Mm.
there's what you perceive as how they look when they come in may disguise who knows what going on in their brains.
Mm.
So that's one thing is that social acceptance is hugely important to them to the extent that social pain for an adolescent, so embarrassment, rejection, those sorts of things, which as adults we think, oh, that's actually quite minor. Um,
Mm.
but to an adolescent, social pain is processed by the same part of the brain that processes physical pain.
Mm.
So if I'm asking a child, a teenager, an adolescent to give an answer that they're not sure of, and the answer might embarrass them in front of their friends, that's the equivalent of you or I feeling under physical threat
Mm.
because their brains are going to process that embarrassment that they might feel as physical pain.
Wow.
That's how all consuming it is. And I did want to mention that because you, at one point, I can't find that I've written down the timestamp. Um, oh yeah, we all know what grooming is, you said. Sorry, I haven't got the time written down of it, but
It's okay.
you said something about I'm not going to just talk to you about what child sexual abuse is. We all know what grooming is. And you asked them to stand up and sit down if you couldn't answer that question, and they
Yes.
all sat down. Did they all sit down
Huh.
because they could answer the question, or did they all sit down because some of them did and they didn't want to lose face?
Okay, so let's talk about that for that
Yeah.
little exercise that I do. And
Oh,
like, oh cool, I can't wait to hear what you think.
yeah.
Especially with the placement of it, because I actually placed it very early on.
Yeah. No,
So
I think
just
that's
for those
important. Yeah.
that haven't watched the video of me presenting, what I did very early on was I asked everybody to stand. So the whole group stand. And then I said, can you stay standing if you would be happy to answer this question in front of
That's right.
everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I click on the slide to the next slide, and it's what is sexual abuse? Now, what's really interesting here is that it's almost like a social experiment
Mm,
because you see the some of the students that want to stay standing, but as more people sit,
yeah.
more people sit until
Yeah.
there's no one standing anymore. In that particular recording, it was to year 11s, nobody stood. Very
Yeah.
interestingly, in year 7s and year 8s, you get more people remaining standing,
Yeah.
two or
Yeah.
three, but mostly everybody sits.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of that exercise? Is it good or is it not? The reason, what, just before I hand over, one of the reasons why I kind of like it, but I think maybe so early is it's too early. We're
Mm,
just introducing ourselves to each other. One of the
mm.
reasons why I like it is I think when you get everybody to stand, it kind of like re-energizes the room.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I totally agree with that. The getting everyone standing and the small amounts of movement you did, good,
mm,
good, really good. Definitely keep doing that. That's
okay.
great. And I actually don't have a problem with the question. And I think actually really early on it is worth making sure they're all really aware
Mm.
of what did you say? Sexual abuse.
What is sex? Would you be happy to answer the question of
Okay, so
what is
what is
sexual abuse?
sexual abuse? Okay, so nobody was happy to answer that question.
Yeah, in front of
So
their friends. Yeah.
in front of their friends. So there's several reasons. One, they don't know,
Yep.
and they're not willing to admit that they don't know.
Yep.
Two, they do know, but it's quite a scary thing to answer.
Absolutely.
Three, they kind of know, but it's really hard to verbalize.
Right.
So those, I think, probably are the three answers. And I think they probably do know because hopefully they've had good education in school about this
Mm.
already. So I think there's probably a blend of different things there. Um, and you could achieve the same outcome by changing the way you do it slightly. In that
Please.
actually, why don't you just take away the possibility of them having to say it in front of everybody in the year
Mm.
group? So by saying something like, do you feel you know yourself what sexual abuse is? Without that, you're not going to call on them. You're not going to ask them to out themselves in front of
Yeah.
everybody. So you take away that risk for them so they can still engage with the question.
Okay.
Um, and then you could ask, would anybody like to give me their idea of what they think it should be, it is? Um, and so there's no sort of right or wrong, so they can't get it
Mm.
wrong. And I think somebody said unwanted contact, didn't they? Or
Yes.
unwanted physical contact,
Yes.
which is, yeah, bang on the money. And that's great. But actually, because they all sat down, there are reasons why they didn't feel confident in defining that. Is it worth then saying, right, this is what it is, and putting it on the board and
Yeah.
being really, really
Yeah.
definitive about it? Because I'd imagine a lot of what they were thinking is it's really broad and it's really hard to
Yeah.
define because there's so many nuances.
Yeah.
So yes, they probably have been taught this before, and I know you don't want to just repeat
Mm.
what else has been done, but it'll take you 30 seconds to go,
Yeah.
this is what we're talking about today. And this is one definition of
Okay.
sexual abuse.
This is so great. So I think straight away your wording of it is so good because it is such a broad question and a difficult one for us adults to answer. So to
And
say,
what if you've got a child in there who thinks, I think I have been sexually abused, but I
mm,
don't know because I don't really know how to define it.
mm, okay,
What if that happens?
okay. So
So I
two
think it's
things,
worth being quite explicit about it because
right,
in that situation, you had them all sit down and you did talk about unwanted contact and you did mention grooming. But if there was anyone in the room who was unsure, they're still unsure at the end of that little
right,
segment.
okay, all right. So the two things, the first one is your wording is great because it's like remain standing if you could help me come
Yeah,
what
brill.
give me an idea of what sexual abuse could be. It's a bit
Yes,
more
or might
open.
include. Yeah,
Well,
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah,
what it
much more
might include.
open. Yeah,
It's so much
much.
more inclusive, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think just that change in wording, which I just think so
So
great.
subtle.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
think
so
that
subtle.
kind of sets a space of you may not get it right, you may not get it wrong. In fact, no one let's talk about it instead
Yeah,
of what is sexual
absolutely.
abuse. I want a definitive.
And you can extend it because you made a comment. Sorry, I'm being really nitpicky.
But this is what we need.
And it doesn't,
What we
well, me
need.
me nitpicking like this doesn't mean I think it was
This
bad.
is
I
what
think
we
it's really
need.
good.
Go, go, go. This
But
is what
you
we need.
said, and in a almost offhand way, we know what grooming is, don't we?
Yes. Okay.
What if they don't?
Okay. So where do I strike the balance here?
Okay.
Because
So you
because
could still say that, and we all know what grooming is because they probably do, and then just follow that with a statement about what grooming is. Again, 10 seconds of your time,
yeah, it's
tiny
yeah,
amount.
yeah.
And then the child who sat in that room going, oh, we all know what grooming is, but I don't. So
Mm,
I've not been listening, or I've done something wrong, or I
mm,
don't know something I should know.
yeah.
Oops. You
Okay.
know, what if that, there might be a child that experiences that. And I'm talking about the minority of children because
Yes.
I don't think you did a bad job at all, and I think you would have reached most children in
Mm,
that
mm,
room.
mm.
But I'm coming from the angle of what about the minority that didn't? And
Mm,
actually, is that the child that we do really
mm,
need to
mm, mm.
reach with this information? And how can I ensure that I've got as many of those as children with me as possible in the room? And just by making those subtle changes, and we all know what grooming is da 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 da,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
makes a big
So
difference. Yeah.
it's not going to take any time. It's going to be a
Nope.
slide with a short statement that we're going to read together.
Yeah.
Because at the start of the talk, I say, give me a nod if you've been taught a million times
Yeah.
about body boundaries, And then
Yeah.
everybody nods. And you should
Yeah.
see their faces. They are like, yes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
give me a nod. And straight away, what I like about that is it creates some engagement. It's
Yeah.
just nodding. It's not in front of their friends. And I kind of set a space of like, look, I'm not a teacher, right? And this is not going to be another lesson,
Mm.
but I can still keep that because I think that creates a nice bit of communication. But actually, just putting little snippets in of
Yeah. Yeah.
information still
And I
isn't
think
enough.
that you're not a teacher is really positive and it's something different. Um, But the reason teachers are teachers are because they're excellent at communicating with young people. So there's a
Okay.
lot you can take from how teachers are taught to deliver lessons and how to teachers
Yeah.
know how to communicate with young people and make
Mm.
it easier for them. So yeah, the fact that you're not a teacher is a strength.
Yes.
Um, but there's also lots of little nuggets you can take from what really, really good teachers do to
Mhm.
engage students. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the valuable pieces of information that I got probably about a year ago, which changed everything for me, was a teacher said to me, and I wonder what you think about this, because my hour talk used to be the first 30 to 40 minutes, I used to just story tell, me talking
Hmm.
at them and take
Yeah.
them through a journey through this
Mm.
story. And yes, it was engaging, but after a while, you could see people would start drifting off. And a teacher said to me, look, if you're talking for longer than 6 minutes, it's too much. You need to switch it up all the
Yeah.
time. Different image, different video, different subject area, different question.
Yes and no. I agree to some extent and with caveats perhaps. So yes, I do. I think you've got to keep them engaged. And if you just talk for quite a long time, they don't um stay with you unless you're really engaging.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
So if
Yeah,
you're really
fair enough.
engaging, then they will stay with you.
Yeah,
But if
fair
if
enough.
they're bored, they won't.
Mm,
So be engaging. And then you can talk for longer than 6 minutes if they're really, do you know what I mean? And also you're talking about things that and you're getting them to think.
mm,
So you do need to build in thinking time.
mm. Yeah.
And they need to process it in order to remember it and to take what you want from it. So if you are going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, they're like bamboozled by information and lots of
Right.
stimulus. And so that it's okay to have that silence for a moment or two.
Mm.
And it is really nervy and lots of teachers find it hard as early career teachers find it hard when you ask a question and then you don't get an answer straight away because as the presenter, as the person out the front, you're like, come on. You
Yeah.
know, 10 seconds feels like a long time to hold
Yeah.
silence, doesn't it, when you're in
Yes,
front of a
absolutely.
crowd?
Yeah.
It's not very long thinking time. So I think it's also worth getting a bit more comfortable with slightly longer
Okay.
periods of silence when you've asked them to respond to something, when you've asked them to think of something.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's my caveat. Yeah, keep it keep it dynamic, definitely. But if you have to rely on changing a slide every 30 seconds, if you have to rely on the TikTok
Yeah.
speed of
Yeah.
engagement, then I would just suggest perhaps you're not engaging enough.
Okay. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think that is you at all. I
Yes,
think you
yes.
were
Yeah.
really engaging. I think you
Yeah.
were really engaging. But yes, if you're relying on that, then you need to be more engaging.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, that's good. I
Yeah.
completely accept that.
Mm.
That's a great point. Okay, so Rachel, I know you have watched the video on my YouTube channel, and please, like,
Yeah.
really, anybody that's listening or watching along on YouTube, please do go check out that presentation because we are referring back to it all the time. It's the last podcast that I released. It's
Yeah.
better to watch along because you get to see the slideshow
Yeah.
in the corner
Yeah.
of the screen too. I know you've watched that and written some notes. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it'd
So
be great.
should we go through
Yeah,
step by
let's do
step?
that.
There was one, so all really, really great. And I've already talked about worth defining those terms up front. And then you go straight into the film that you made,
Mm,
which was great. It's something different. They're not just
yes.
going to sit, they straight away they think, well, I'm not just going to sit and be taught what CSA is again. Um, but just give a warning. I know that they've had the warning from the
Mm,
teacher and they've had the letter to the parents, but could they, when you say, right, you're going to watch a film and they know that there's talks about sexual abuse, are they going to be thinking, oh no, what am I going to see?
mm,
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Could there be some children in there? Sorry, I shouldn't say children, year 11s, young people, students who
yes.
are like a bit nervous? And are we then putting them on high alert rather than dopamine engagement learning? So just really simply give a tiny warning. Don't worry. This video is about a child's perception of a relationship. There is nothing explicit included. There's nothing to worry about. Just again, 10 seconds. worth doing, I think, just in case. Many of them won't worry about it, but the ones that do probably won't show it, so you
Mm.
won't know. So
Okay,
it's
so
worth
that's just
something in
about,
cleaner,
and
keeping
that's
the room
just
safe.
about,
Yeah,
that's just about um helping or easing those that may be panicking at the moment that I'm like, I'm
yeah,
going to show you a film about
yeah,
this.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
what? What's he going to show? Oh my God, I can't believe it.
yeah.
So it's just
I
about
mean, where,
easing
yeah,
that.
yeah, just ease it, just a tiny little moment going, I'm going to show you a film now, about, and give
Yeah,
a brief, really brief
yeah.
overview of it. Or it's just one sentence or a couple of
Yeah.
words. Don't worry, there is nothing explicit in this. There's nothing scary in this.
Mhm. Okay, you're brilliant.
Just to be really clear to
Yeah,
them
it's
so that
so
they
good.
know
These
they can watch it and take stuff from it rather than watching it going, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next?
right, which
You know?
again is what you touched upon at the start of this conversation,
Mm.
where we're not looking for them to be on high alert because they
No.
won't observe. They're just in
Yeah.
in a state of fear.
Yeah. And that's not what you want because they're not gonna then. So what we want them to use is that this part of the brain, the
Okay,
prefrontal cortex. And
right.
you can't do that if you're frightened. You can't do that if you're emotional in any way.
Wow.
Okay. So we do want them to be relaxed, confident, happy, in order to absorb the messages you're going to
Mhm.
take from it. And I think on the whole you achieve that, but there's tiny tweaks you can make just in
Lovely.
case there are some that
Yeah.
may not. Yeah. And even I was just like, I'd not seen the film before and I wasn't frightened or worried, but it passed through my head, oh, what is this going to be?
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was that bit. Um, and then after that, you did a question, left hand, right hand, both hands.
How did you think about that?
Really good. I use that all the time in class. It's really
Okay.
good. It's a quick feedback, but I have written on my notes here, give more thinking time. You were quite
Mm,
quick. You were quite
mm,
quick. This question, this question. And I get that
mm.
that's because you were trying to be dynamic and engaging, but they are young people and you've done this loads of times before. So you probably lose the perception of how long they need to
Yeah.
think. I do it all the time in class, and I'm like, I know where I want you to go with this. I've done this 100 times before. And I have to sort of stop and go, okay, well, you've never done this before. You've never thought about this before. I need to give you time because you are still young and your
Yeah,
brain's
but it's like what
developing.
you say when you're in front of
Yeah, it's
180
really hard.
students,
Yeah.
and you've asked them to think about the
Yeah.
answer to the question, which, for context, was how many girls out of 100
Yeah.
will go through some form of sexual abuse in person or online before the age of 16? And I give three options: one out of 100, five out of 100, 15 out of 100.
Yeah.
Um,
And many of them will know straight away, and that's fine.
but it's just so
And they
difficult
might
to,
use their pointing straight away, and that's fine.
yeah,
But just give it a fraction longer so
yeah,
that
it's
they've
so
all had a
tough.
chance to do that. So tough it is, but you just have to get comfortable with the
Okay, brilliant.
silence a
Yeah,
bit. But
excellent.
I'm not talking about give minutes. I'm talking about give 20 seconds rather than 10,
Okay,
or
okay.
give 15 seconds
Yeah,
rather than 5. Not,
yeah.
it's not huge, but some young people don't learn very well by listening to the question and they want to read it. That's going to take them a little bit
Yes,
longer. Some of
yes.
them will be trying to listen to you and then get distracted by the board. So that might take them a little bit longer to process.
Yes.
Everybody engages in different ways. And as a teacher and a presenter, that's difficult because you'll never get it perfect for everyone in the room
Mm,
because
mm,
everyone's different.
mm.
But you can just make tiny tweaks that just make it that little bit more
Brilliant.
inclusive for the child that's reading instead of listening or trying to do both and getting a bit overstimulated or what have you. Yeah.
Did you think it had value to present the statistics from the government to them, and interact with them in this way?
Yes, I do. But I think you just need to be careful with how you present that statistic. And I think I've written it down a bit later about another
Okay.
slide, but it's a valid point here. It was 15% of of girls
Yeah.
experience some sort of. That does not mean that 15% of that room will,
Okay.
because it's a statistic.
Okay. Tell me more. Explain more.
So, um, there is a chance that 15% of that room will experience sexual abuse, but it's a statistic. So 15% of the country that was sampled had
Oh,
experienced it.
wow. Okay.
So what you don't want is the girls leaving the room looking around going, 15% of us are, it's going to happen.
Wow.
1 in 4 people get cancer. That doesn't mean I'm going to get cancer, does it?
Right.
It means there's a 25% chance that I will get cancer. It's different.
Wow. I've never thought about it like that before.
And you said it again later on. You talked about the three, I didn't write them down, but there was three situations. It won't ever happen.
So
No,
it's
you don't give that. Yeah.
it's the people in this room. There are people in this. The three situations of this
Yeah.
abuse is it. There will be people in here that it's either happened to already, it's happening to right now, or it will happen to in the future.
No. There's some people in that room that it will never happen to.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really, really subtle that if you take things really literally, and some students are neurodivergent, and some teenagers take things really literally because, like statistics and that's probability is quite a hard concept to understand. They're leaving the room going, we're going to be in one of those three groups.
Mm,
No, there is a huge group that's never going to happen to you.
right.
What about the other option? It won't ever happen. Or just changing the word that if somebody experiences abuse, they then have got these three, they fall into one of these
Yes.
three
Yes.
categories. Not
Yes.
everybody in that room falls into that category. And I
Yes.
know that's not what you intended, and most children will assume that's not what you intended.
Yeah.
What about the neurodivergent ones who take things very literally?
Mm, 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 mm,
Got to be really, really careful with that.
mm.
So yeah, you just be really careful with how we present statistics because the statistics, they're not certainties.
Mm. Wow. Okay.
So there is a chance that 15% of the girls in this room will could experience sexual abuse
What I've done with that statistic,
rather than
because the
will.
statistic from the government is actually a percentage
Yeah.
on their website. But
Mm.
what I've done in my
They might need to
brain,
change it to a chance. Yeah.
what I've
What's
done in my brain, it said, right, well, 15%, that means
Mm.
15 out of 100. Like that's what
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
means.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I changed it and I've actually changed it incorrectly. Yeah, because 180 students, let's say 200, just for math's
Mm.
sake,
Yeah.
that means those girls are looking around being like 30 of us in here.
Which 30 of us are going to be? Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So you could still present it like that, but you could say it's a possibility that that might happen because it won't be 30 in every room of 200, will it?
And maybe, whether consciously or subconsciously, I've changed it to that 15 out of 100 because I want to use that statistic because what I want to achieve is everyone to be like, this is serious.
Okay, yeah. So let's think about what's the message you're trying to get across? You're trying to get across the message to young people that it's not rare, unfortunately.
Yeah,
There is a possibility it could happen to somebody in this room.
yeah,
And what can we do to prevent that? Is that your
right.
objective?
I mean, that the way you just worded it is better than I would have worded it. Yes. But yes,
Yes.
it absolutely is. But what I'm doing at the moment, right? So what the way you just worded it is where I want to get to,
Yeah.
right? Because it's productive, it's interesting, it's captivating,
Mm,
it's real. But what I feel like I'm doing at the moment is be careful
mm.
because there's a load of your mates in here that this is going to happen to. What are
Yeah.
we going to do about this? We
This
need
could
high alert.
happen to. This could happen to.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Could. Just change is going to could.
But you see the
Yeah.
difference in my approach. My
Yeah.
approach actually is fear mongering.
Perhaps. And I get that. I get that we we want them to be alert to it, but we don't want them to be frightened in the room when you're
Mm.
teaching them how for it not to happen to them.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, just really subtle changes in the we don't want them all leaving thinking, well, inevitably this is going to happen to me.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Um, and we don't want them to resign to the fact that because actually so many young people are resigned to that fact already.
Right.
Getting unwanted sexual contact on Instagram is the price you pay for using Instagram, and that is the perception for lots of, especially girls,
Mm.
getting photographs from older men
Yeah,
of their genitalia
yeah.
is the price you pay to be on
Right.
Instagram.
Mm.
Right, so there is almost a resignation potentially in some groups. Many people use Instagram and never have, or
Yes,
Meta bot products and never have that problem.
yes.
Um, uh, but some do, and some there was some data that came out. It was US data, but I think it was something like they sampled a load of 16-year-old girls and something like I can't remember the exact figure, but it was somewhere between 15 and 20% had received unwanted sexual contact within the last week.
Right. Wow.
Scale
Wow.
that out for the number of hours young people spend
Wow.
on social media. It's crazy high, the amount of unwanted sexual contact online. So there's an inevitability, I think, in many young people that, that this is the price you pay for engaging in the world that we live
Mhm.
in. We could do a whole talk about the dangers of porn online, but because that's commonplace and often violent, many young people think this is
Yes.
what I have to engage with to be part of a relationship,
Yeah.
and there's an inevitability to it. Socially, we've got to this point where sex has become transactional, like third date, that's when you have sex with someone. We've got
Yeah.
to this point in society where young people just some young people are resigned to this is what has to happen.
Mm.
And we don't really want to play into that because we want to undo that, don't we? We want to say, no, you can do what you want and what is right for you.
Mm.
Care about yourself enough to make a decision that's right for you, not to go with what is happening because you think that's just the
Yeah.
way the world works. Change the way the world works,
Yes. Yeah.
If nothing changes, then nothing changes. We have
Mm.
to help people to reject that. So, I mean, we're getting really deep into a point where which was originally about a statistic, but I think we have to make sure that they are aware that there is another option, and that is that this will never happen.
Yeah.
And there are things we can do to help make sure that this never happens.
That's so much more positive and encouraging than
Mm,
it's such a nice adjustment to my message.
yeah. And I know that's your message. Actually, I got the idea that that was your message, and most students in that room will have accepted that and got that message too. But what about the ones that didn't? What about the ones who were neurodivergent or on high alert and worried
Yeah.
anyway, and then they're
Yeah.
just hearing the negative, and what about those ones? Which I don't know. If we could survey the room and find out if there were any, there may not have been, and I might be just
Mm, mm,
really nitpicky.
mm, mm.
But I think it's worth caring about the tiny
Yes.
minority. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What was another point? There was another point, and again, she said it really offhand, but worth changing, I think, at 17 minutes 40. And you talked, and it was about social media again, and you said, and I think it was just slip of the tongue actually, inappropriate DMs, people getting inappropriate DMs from people they shouldn't have.
Mm.
And I think you need to change that to inappropriate DMs from people who shouldn't have sent them.
Yes. So
Because
great.
what we have to, and it's really easy to do this by accident, is that we don't want to end up victim blaming.
Mm.
So if I have heard that and I haven't had time to process it and think about it, and I don't know you, and I live in a world where it's commonplace for me to get these kinds of messages, if I hear you say inappropriate DMs from people they shouldn't have, it's my fault. I shouldn't have accepted that request, or I
Yeah.
shouldn't have engaged with that person. It's my fault. It's not their fault. They're a child and an adult was doing something wrong. So we need to just maybe change it like subtly. They got inappropriate DMs from someone who should not have sent them. It's
Yeah.
that person's fault. They should not have done that.
Yeah.
It's not the recipient's fault, because there is a little bit of a worry because the law changed a while ago, didn't it? That it's illegal now to even have explicit images on your
Mm-mm.
phone, and that's to protect young people. But that was taught in schools, and some people got really worried about it. Like, but they sent it to me, and now I'm the one in trouble, and they got really anxious about it. And then therefore hid their phones and
Right.
didn't speak up about those things because they thought they would be in trouble
Mm.
because of the way that law was communicated with young people. So I think there's maybe some subtleties there, that there might still be a bit of worry about that I've been sent this, I know it's wrong, and therefore I'm worried about getting into trouble, so I'm going to hide my phone because I don't want to have my phone taken away.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I mean, that part where I say to the audience, I think I mentioned, I just don't know if it's correct. Yeah, I never planned to say this, but I said it.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
I said, and I'm pretty sure there are girls in here because I say something like a boy's world is very different to a girl's world online,
Yeah.
which it
I think it's
is.
true. Yeah.
and I say, I'm pretty sure there will be girls in here who have had inappropriate DMs that they shouldn't have received, something like that. I don't even know if I need to do anything
No,
like that.
and I think you could go down a rabbit hole then as well, because it's not just girls who suffer from that social expectation and inevitability. Boys might think I have to do this, I have to send this because again, this is the price I pay. This is the expectation on me by society to be in a relationship with someone.
Mm,
So it's not just negatively impacting girls who are receiving that. Is that becoming the social norm? And
mm,
boys think they have to
yeah.
conform. There's a really worrying statistic. It's about again pornography and young people experience of young people of pornography. It was by the Children's Commissioner. It's worth having a look. I'll send you a link. About and one of the pieces of data, they sampled loads of young people and said, I think it was like 49% or something. It was near half of people, all young people aged 16 expect sex to include physical violence, including airway restriction. So almost half of the young people sampled expect that. And that's girls expecting that to happen to them and boys expecting that they have to do that,
Mm,
not necessarily wanting to. So when we talk about the negative impacts of unwanted sexual contact or a specific kind of contact, um, and girls are used to it. So then our boys thinking, I have to conform
mm,
because we know that teenagers want to conform to the
yeah.
social norm anyway. Like, really, that's a really powerful thing for them. So it's not just, it impacts all of society. What happens to girls does not necessarily mean that the experience is also not negative for boys.
Yes. Such a good point.
And if boys feel like, oh, girls have got it worse than me, so I've got this thing that's happened to me and it seems negligible in comparison, I can't talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
This
then you
is
end up with these alienated group
mm,
of boys who don't think
yeah.
that their experiences are valid. And then someone like Andrew Tate comes along and validates all their feelings and
Yeah.
sets them up. Like it's a minefield. It's a minefield. But
Okay. Yeah. I don't think
yeah.
I should. Yeah, yeah. I said it a few times. I delivered to every year group that day, seven
Mm.
to 11. So
Oh yeah, you just say things
you
sometimes.
you,
Yeah.
you end up
Mm.
saying things, and they were never what you intended to say. But it
Yeah.
felt good at the time, and it felt
Yeah, yeah.
right at the time, and you were driving for a connection with those girls in the room. Again, trying to reiterate how serious this is, that this is real and happening. It's not something that doesn't happen in your school. But I think it's not necessary.
Yeah, or you could just change it to, I know it's highly possible that young people can receive explicit images
Yeah,
through
yeah,
social media contact. Just make it that instead
yeah.
of there are probably girls who have. Because
Yes,
what about the
yes,
girl goes, well, I haven't, everybody else has. What's wrong with
yes,
me?
yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's just
yeah.
like, so it's a minefield with teenagers. So you
Okay,
could say it's possible that,
yeah,
you know,
okay, brilliant.
yeah. Right, where have we got to next? We talked about the three situations. That was at 18 minutes 30. Um, uh, to make Oh, okay. Then we get into you got them to, and I liked sort of what you did here, where you got them to stand up and think about something that they were embarrassed about, and then you gave them time, and then I would just make sure you tell them to make it something minor.
Yeah, yeah, I played around
Uh,
with this exercise a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think when you started it, I was like, I know where you're going with this, and I hope you do it well. But you did, you really did. But just tell them to make it something minor, because what if you've had someone in the room who has experienced something quite traumatic recently,
Mm,
related or unrelated to what you're talking about, and then you're asking them to remember it and they start reliving it, and then you've lost
yes,
them because their brains have gone down somewhere we don't want it
yes,
to go. So just say make it something minor, you tripped in the canteen or whatever.
yeah,
And then you say three, two, one, share. And then, but what was good about it was you immediately said stop. You
right,
didn't give even a second for them to
right.
think, you immediately said stop. So I was thinking, are you going to push them into a fight, flight, freeze response? And they're
Mm,
going to go, and then that you've lost their brains, the useful thinking part of their brain for the rest of the session. And you didn't do that because you so quickly said, no, 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 don't do it.
right.
So I think that was really good. I could see what you were. I can see what you were trying to achieve with it, and it could have so easily gone wrong.
Yeah.
But because you went through that really quickly, I think, and I think if you could just add in an extra layer of protection by saying make this as something minor,
Right.
you know, um, I think that was, yeah, I think it was
Okay,
effective.
so when I'm doing that, when I'm saying, right, I want you to think of, I think the thing that I use is I want you to think of something that you've done recently that you'd be embarrassed if your mates found out about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I could just play around a little bit because I'm smiling when I'm doing this because I
Yeah.
want it to
Yeah.
be fun as well. And I could
Yeah.
say, but don't go too far. Like,
Yeah.
just make it something a bit trivial. Like, and I could give a couple
Yeah.
of examples. Like you said,
Yeah.
you tripped over in the canteen and no one saw.
Yeah.
You could,
Yeah.
it's a good opportunity to get a little laugh as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Just think of, yeah, something reasonably trivial. But then I thought there's an opportunity to take it further. And I think, I mean, I am not in any way an expert on CSA or talking to young people who have experienced it or the nuances socially and neurologically why people don't talk. But I do know that certainly for very young children, often they can't report something that they don't have a vocabulary for,
yeah.
right? So there's several ways I thought it might be interesting to use that idea. And so you said you say so you asked them to share it and then immediately say stop. And how did that make you feel? And then you could go further and say, when you in that split second when you thought you had to share it, did you have any difficulty with trying to find the right words?
Mm,
Right, because that is potentially a problem, isn't it, with sharing something
mm,
that is intimate, is that how do we have the right vocabulary to
yeah.
be able to share that? And that is part of why sex ed and puberty education and discussion of intimate body parts in school is really important because it gives young people the confidence to use that vocabulary when they need to.
Right.
So you could sort of use that idea and say you need to talk about something embarrassing. Were you struggling to find the words to do that?
Mm,
Imagine now trying to find the words to talk about
yeah.
something that's really intimate. That's quite hard to do.
Mm,
And adults find that hard to talk, to do that in front of a doctor, let
yes.
alone,
Yes.
somebody who's their friend. So you could maybe tie in that idea and then maybe talk about this is why we need to have that education in school and we need to be able to model saying, using terms for genitalia and some intimate behavior, perhaps,
Mm,
um, and that then we need to not shy away from using those words
mm,
because they're anatomical words. They're words to do with human behavior that is completely normal. Um, and we have to be able to have the confidence to use them when we need to.
yeah.
We don't have to sit around the dinner table talking about our fannies, but we do need to be able to use those words when we need to confidently. And
Yeah.
so there is an import. It is important to have that vocabulary, especially when you're talking about something that you're already finding challenging.
Okay. So with this exercise, then I'm it's working well. Couple
Mm,
more adjustments moving forward, but there's
mm.
once I've run through the whole exercise, there's so much potential at the end,
Yeah,
isn't there? There's so much
yeah,
potential to realize. You've taken them on a little journey. Everybody's
yeah,
understood it. It's relatable. And now let's summarize and let's summarize it well.
yeah. Just before we get on to that, the Annie video, which was really good.
Yeah.
Again, just give that warning. Don't worry, she doesn't
Yeah.
mention anything, any
Yeah.
details or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we get on to um, oh no, hang on. Again, you talk about her after that video, you use the phrase, she ends up getting herself in this
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. It's
She
wrong.
ended up in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not of her
Yeah.
making, like
Completely wrong.
again, tiny little thing. Um, but it wasn't her fault.
Yeah. Completely wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't her fault. And yeah, young people really need to understand
Mm,
that if that happens, it's not your fault. You haven't done
yeah.
anything wrong. You are not a bad person. You we should live in a world where we don't expect bad things to happen.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
should not have to go about our lives taking evasive action all the
Yes.
time. We should
Yes.
go about our lives with confidence and joy and happiness. And we don't want them going out of the room thinking it's my responsibility to make sure
Yeah.
this happens
Yeah.
happens to me. No, it's an adult's responsibility in law enforcement and responsible adults in the community to make sure that doesn't happen to young people. It's not the child's responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen to them.
So I knew I said that as well. I remember at the time thinking, oh, when I said that. So
But hey, when you say it, it's all right to go, hang on, no, I shouldn't have
yeah,
said that.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Actually, that'd be
fine to do
valuable.
that, and it's good to do that. I make mistakes all the time and go, no, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, that was the wrong phrase to use. I should have used this phrase. I do it all the time because, we slip up like we're human, and you're talking and in front of people, and yeah, it's perfectly all right to stop and go, actually, I just said that and I
Yeah,
shouldn't have, and
yeah,
that's not what I meant
yeah,
actually. And then that's a good point for them it's good for young people to see you correct your mistakes because that we're modeling what we want them to do.
mm,
And also for them to understand that it's so easy to slip into that
yeah.
unhelpful language. Um, and that it is important that we put that right. And it is important that you understand that it wasn't her fault and you know that.
And that
It's
that would
perfectly all right to
that would
admit
have
you made a mistake
like
and change it.
if I had corrected myself at the time, um that would have been another form of connection that we could have had together because they'll be like,
It
oh,
would.
this guy's like normal guy.
And
Yeah,
also, yeah, absolutely. And also reinforce the point that it's so easy to, for people to think it's so
yeah,
easy
yeah,
to get
yeah,
into that narrative.
yeah,
And it just highlights that point even more that
yeah,
it's not your fault if you end up in this situation and it
yeah.
wasn't her fault. And it just highlights that point even more. Yeah, I think.
With Annie's video, the reason why I really think it's a good thing to include is because we focused a lot about my story, which is prepubescent childhood. Now
Yeah,
we can talk about something that's in teenage years, then they can
yeah,
relate to that too. Then it's a female perspective. And
yeah,
also, mine was a grooming situation,
yeah,
Annie's was more of a one
yeah.
event.
It was a circumstance. Yeah.
Yes, it was a circumstantial
Mm, yeah.
situation. So I think that just adds a lot more, it just creates a more
Yeah.
rounded picture.
Yeah, it does. And it's, what happened to me is not how it happens to everybody.
Yeah,
There are other ways that this can
yeah,
happen to someone, and none of it is their fault.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
happens in different ways. Um, yeah, I think that's really
Rachel,
good.
just before you continue, I know we're
Yeah.
coming up to the hour, and I always like
Oh
to cap
gosh.
these at
Okay.
an hour, but
Yeah.
I would hate for us to stop right now because we
Yeah.
haven't got through your notes. Are you okay
Yeah.
to go for a little bit
Of
longer?
course. Yeah. 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 Of course. Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
time? Yeah.
Um,
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
yeah.
No trouble at all.
So
No trouble at all.
it would just be great to get through
Yeah.
your
Yeah. I've only
comment.
got a little bit left, so
Okay, yeah,
it's fine.
brilliant,
Yeah. Yeah.
brilliant.
Okay. That you go on to talking about your action plan and who to
Yes.
tell at about 29 minutes. Um, and you say who to tell. You know this already, and hopefully they do.
Mm,
But again, what if they don't?
mm.
But I think that is all right because you go into the details of who they could tell, but maybe reframe the question to instead of saying, "I know you know this already," you could say, "Can you share with me who you would go to?" Um, or you could distance it even more. So if I say, who would you go to if this happened to you? They're immediately thinking, how would I feel if this happened to me? And that's a scary thing. And that's an unpleasant thing. So you could reframe the question to, where would someone your age go to? Who
Oh,
might
love it.
someone your age go to? And then you've distanced it. You're not making them sit in an example where they're imagining themselves something horrible having happened to themselves.
Yeah. Wow.
Where would you advise your friend to go to?
Yeah, I really like the age one. I really like where would someone your
Someone your
age go?
age
Because
go.
that's that turns it into a group.
Yeah. And it doesn't put them at the center of the
Yeah, yeah,
scenario.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay,
we
and the
don't really
action
want a
plan.
room full of people sitting there imagining that they've been sexually abused,
Yeah,
do we?
yeah. Yeah, you're right. You've got a room full of people putting themselves in a position of somebody that's just been sexually abused.
Yeah.
Again, negative, panic, fear.
Not necessarily helpful. Yeah. Not necessarily helpful. So yeah, I just subtle change that you could say, where would someone your age go? Where might they
How
go?
do you feel about the three-pronged action plan? Because that's a new thing, by the way, Rachel. I never
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
do it, but I want to
Yeah,
leave
yeah.
them with something.
So
Rachel, let me tell you, this is one of the reasons why I put the action plan in because I think it's great and
yeah.
I think it's good for schools to see that that's what we're doing. But
Mm,
also, what I want is in my mind is if you went to those students in a year's time or even
mm.
5 years' time and said, "Do you remember that man that came in and spoke about his story?" And they're like, "Yeah, I remember." What else do you remember except for the fact that he his story, and I want them to think, oh, he left us with this action plan. It was tough. I want, I want to
What
leave
do you
them.
actually want to leave them with? You want to, though, I don't know, my perception is you want them to leave with the confidence to know that this shouldn't happen and to do something about it, not
Right,
just accept the inevitability of
right.
it. Right? Is
Yep,
that what you want?
yep.
Yeah. That if this does happen, it's it shouldn't have happened and you can get help.
Right.
Yeah.
That is essentially my message. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So when, hang on, let me just read my notes. Bu- 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 oh yeah. Uh, I think you asked a question. Oh yeah, just after that question, reframe the question, who would you go to for help? I think you said I'm not going to pick on people or
Mm, mm.
something which is really good because that doesn't necessarily help if kids are sitting there going, I'm going to be picked on and I don't know what to
Yeah.
say. You can just change that to have a think about it, give some thinking time, and then I'll get your feedback.
Mm.
And then there's no judgment on the answer. I'll take your
Yes.
feedback. I'll see what you
Yes.
think. Yeah, something like that. Again, or I'll be interested to hear your ideas about where someone your age might want to go.
Yes.
That's just they're less worried about getting the answer wrong.
Do you know what else? You know these changes you're making to the way I'm presenting like these exercises. What I think you're doing brilliantly is the adjustments you're suggesting put me more as like we're all in this together. We're friends here. Like
Mm,
I am not a dictator. I am not
yeah.
here to ask you questions and make sure you get them
Get the
correct.
answer right. Yeah, yeah. Although we do want them to make sure that they've taken away what we want them to take away from it. So
Right.
there is that sort of element of getting some sort of feedback from them. But you just it's just helpful for them that often, it's a complex situation and that in some ways there's an obvious right and wrong, but in the answers that they give, there isn't a right and wrong,
Mm.
and there is nuance to it. So instead of going, I want to hear your answers, or I want to get the list of where we think where you can go, where they thinking, oh, we have an assembly on this, and I have to remember.
Yeah.
You can just say something. I'll get your feedback. I'll be interested to hear where you think someone your age might go for
Yeah.
help. And then they're not saying this is where I would go, so they're not putting themselves out
Mm.
there, but you're getting a better idea of actually where someone their age would go and
Yeah.
what is reasonable for them.
So good.
Useful.
Yeah, it's so good.
Okay, what have we got next? Oh yeah, again at 32 minutes, you said again there will be people in this room who this happens to, and statistically that's correct, but it's not in
Mm,
reality. It's possible that there's no one in that
mm,
room.
mm. Yeah.
And there are more people in the next room.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, I would just change that to it's possible. It's possible too likely that there will be people who I've seen today who will have experienced this,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, and again, a subtle change with don't let it define you.
What do you think
That's
about this?
something that's something they have to do. They have to not let it define them. If you change it to it doesn't need to define you.
Mm,
It takes the pressure off them to
right.
make changes. Like, um, don't let it define you. Okay, what am I going to do to not let it define me? What
Right.
am I going like instead of it doesn't have to define you.
Right.
You can go about your life. You can have other experiences. It doesn't have to shape everything that you do in the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Rather than putting it as a task that they have to complete, don't let it define you.
Right. Brilliant. Yeah.
Subtle change again and again for most young people, they understand that nuance, but some won't.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, this has happened to me, and now I've got to not let it define me. How the hell do I do that?
And it's almost like it's not just a pressure. It's like, well, if it that means, well, if it does define me, I failed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it might define
How
you.
do you feel about that particular point, though? Like, just in general, like,
Yeah. So I think the message you want to avoid is it happened to me, and I'm all right. So it
yes,
doesn't matter.
absolutely,
So it doesn't
and it's
matter
all
that it
good,
happened to
and
me.
this
Yeah,
should this
yeah,
doesn't need to be taken that seriously.
yeah.
That's
But I
I want
don't
to
think.
avoid that.
Yeah, and I think you do. I don't think that's a worry because you did affect you,
Yeah,
and you talked about that.
yeah.
And I think that's really really important. But also you you had access to help, and you had the strength of character and the resilience and the self-worth actually to
Mm,
go, I need to do something about it.
right.
But what if you didn't think that you were worth
Right.
having a good life? So you might not have done that if you didn't think you
Mm,
were worth having a good life. And if you had this experience as a young person, that could be amplified, that feeling.
yeah.
So yeah, I think you do a good job of that. And I think it's a good message that we're not, and again, I don't want to say put a positive spin on it because you shouldn't put a positive spin on something
Mm-mm.
horrible, but it, we're not just showing them what the worst possible outcome is. We're showing them that what the best possible outcome is.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so yeah, I think you do that well, actually. I think you do that really well
Good.
because I'm not left thinking, well, it happened to you and it didn't matter because you've done all right.
Mm.
But I'm also left understanding that it happened to you, and you were able to still achieve things you wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
You were still capable of happiness
Yeah.
and love and good friendships and a positive life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think you got that balance
Right.
really well. I think that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
And then so it was tell someone, don't let it define you, which I can check. You can check. I think it's worth changing. And then the red flags right at the end. Um, you said everyone understands what a red
Mm.
flag is. There might be, countless number of young people who are not English is not their first language, and a
Yeah,
red
that's a
flag
good
might
point.
mean something completely
Yeah.
different.
I
Uh,
don't explain any of it.
yeah, yeah. So a red flag, so we could say is you could explain, well, what might, uh, what circumstance might we want to report immediately, or you just
Yeah.
maybe explain that a little bit
Yeah.
better, and then you didn't actually give any red flags.
No, I didn't. I brush over it.
So yeah, so what if I'm leaving that room going, right, I know I need to tell someone. I know it doesn't need to define me, but
Yeah.
what point is it a red flag?
Yeah.
What,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it could just be really simple is that if anything has made you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to tell someone.
Yeah.
If it's anything that's made you feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you don't have to go because I can see why you don't go into red flags because you don't want to end up listing acts that like, and then you're in a when you're in a position when you're standing in front of a room of children describing a sex act. You don't ever want that to happen, right? So I can see where you go how that happens, but if I'm
But
saying,
also, you would have noticed that actually what I feel like I'm avoiding is doing any lists.
yeah, yeah,
But maybe I
yeah,
need to do
that's
some
okay.
lists. Just the odd one.
Not necessarily a list, but the odd broad definition I think is helpful.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And I mean you could spend hours and hours talking about uh, the nuances of what sexual abuse could be for different people, and you don't need to go down that road. So instead of red flags, you could just say, I don't know, what do you want it to be? You want it to be if something happens, you want them to do step one and step two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you maybe move it to the beginning and
Mm,
say identifying what your boundaries are,
mm,
identifying when you feel uncomfortable, being able to go, I don't care what society thinks, I don't care what my social media is telling me, that felt wrong to me.
right.
Then I tell someone, then I
Right.
live a life where it hasn't defined
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah. Yeah.
is the answer because that's
Yeah.
really difficult. But yeah, I don't think you could end up in a situation where you've sort of explained that there are red flags, but they're leaving the room not knowing what they are
Mm,
and when it's
mm,
okay to speak up.
yeah.
And actually, it's okay to speak up at any point, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So, and it's just them knowing what feels wrong to them,
Mm,
aside from what the social norms have become, because I think the
mm,
social norms have become quite damaging in some
mm,
ways, so that young people just assume that that's normal and it's not, or it doesn't have to be, and we can
mm,
change that. So yeah, I think maybe there is something to be done there,
mm.
perhaps. Yeah, with that little one.
Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Was that the last on your list?
That's my last on my list. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel, that is incredible.
I'm
That's
pleased. I'm
that's
pleased
so
that's
useful.
helpful.
And
Good,
just
I'm
so
glad.
thank you so much for actually going through the video and actually writing notes
You're
on the
welcome.
big
You're welcome.
points.
I think it's a really, really important thing to do in schools, but a really important thing to do positively. And
Hmm.
there aren't really, I've not come across really very many people who have got the drive that you have to do it in that way.
Hmm.
Um, and like you say, I think there is a sort of fatigue on this kind of education for young people, and there are different ways we can do it. And I think you're doing that, and it's just really, really good. And I think it really potentially really, really impactful for lots of young people. And the more that you can carry
Yeah.
on doing it really, really well, the better.
Big
Mm.
thank you for that. And yeah, I will be watching this many times to just like take the notes
Oh,
and
we'll
make
get back in
changes.
touch if there's anything I can
Yeah,
further on. That's no
ready
problem.
for the
Yeah.
next booking.
Mm.
So Rachel, I know you have your own thing going on the side too. I'd love for you to explain what that is to the audience and where they can find you if they want to explore more.
Yeah, so my take on PSHE, and actually I prefer wellbeing in school because I don't want to confine it to one lesson a week or a
Mm.
term or however it's run, is to get these ideas of self-worth, happiness and resilience into schools to improve educational outcomes and to improve teenagers' lives. So I have a platform where I've loads of resources for schools to be able to teach this and make it holistic within their school. And also we're working on lots of tech that allows schools to do that with no admin. So we're using a lot of AI and a lot of tech behind the platform, which I know nothing about, by the way, so I can't talk about it really. But my husband makes it, or he's very good at that. Where teachers can drag and drop a lesson or click a button, and everything that they need to cover for the inspectors and to evidence what they're doing is done for them. The schemes can be done for them, the booklets can be done for them, everything can be done for them, and they can just concentrate on how can I provide a really, really outstanding educational achievement for these students now with for what they need now.
Incredible.
Um, so yeah, that's what we are producing. It's called Eliza Education, and you can find us at elizaeducation.com. And you
Brilliant.
can find me on LinkedIn as well. So I try and put stuff on there. I'm not very good at being consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And we'll all the links to all of that resource will be in our show notes. Please do go and check out Rachel and support what she's doing. I've been on the website and it is actually brilliant. Like I just had a little
Thanks. Thanks.
navigate through there today. Really, really good and interesting and modern and and user friendly. And so
Yeah.
yeah, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you. Thank
So,
you.
to everybody that's watching along on YouTube or listening on your podcast app, a big thank you for joining us on this. As you are following my work, you know I'm constantly trying to improve what I do because I believe, like, literally, the potential is endless with this. I think we can
Mm.
create something so phenomenal and groundbreaking and inspire the next generation. So, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Rachel, thank you for coming on this
You're welcome.
podcast.
It's lovely to talk to
Thank
you.
you.